All right, in the interest of respecting your time, why don't we go ahead and get started? My name's JJ, and I am so delighted to be here with you. Let me see if we can get the screen sharing stopped. And we're here to talk about access to nature at the city's edge. I'm speaking at you from West Philly, around 49th and Baltimore Avenue, which is roughly over here. And when I think of Philadelphia in my early conceptions of it, it was about a skyline, which was right around here. And maybe a historic district around here. I've been hosting some travelers, tourists from out of town, and that's what they hear about Philly is this little cluster of it, the original, the historic, the center-centric, the skyline kind of stuff. But it turns out that Philly is vast and contains multitudes. It is pretty darn huge. And in fact, this map can't even hold it because, as Stephanie well knows, Philadelphia continues way on up the upper Delaware in the far northeast. Bonnie knows that too. And so in 2016, through a little artist residency, one of the other participants of that, Anne DeForest, is here with us. We walked the full perimeter of the city, and we thought we could do it in 4 days, and it took 5.5. We thought we'd do it in 60 miles, and it took over 100, or just on, 103. And it's a thing that I've done every year since then. I'm really grateful and fortunate to be able to do that. And it's a thing I've started inviting other people into. And as that's happened, I'm excited that now several hundred people have been going into this adventure. Some of you who are joining us are familiar with the walk and you know all about it, or you have done it, or you're coming to do it in September. And we'll talk more about the walk itself later. Some of you are here because you're here with some of our partner organizations who are going to be presenting this evening. And that's what I'm excited about, because when we do the walk, we pass through all these places, but we keep on walking. And we have all these questions of what goes on here? How did this come to be like this? Who uses this space? Who lives here? And one of the goals of the walk is just to keep walking and be open, not to take a guided tour with an expert. But sometimes we wish we had experts. We wish we had people who lived in the neighborhoods, who worked at the places, to come and talk to us about what's going on here the rest of the time, beyond when we're just walking through. So that's why we're organizing this event. This is the first in an occasional series of walk talks. There will probably be another one in the fall, wherein we dive into a couple of the issues that come across as we do this walk, and a couple of the issues that are ongoing at the edges of the city. Tonight, we're talking about access to nature at the city's edge, and we have some special guests from Riverfront North Partnership and Cobbs Creek Ambassadors and the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education. Before I introduce them and we start diving into the conversations, we also have a special guest. Our City Council member, Kendra Brooks, is joining us. And so I'm going to invite Councilmember Brooks to share a couple words with us about your experience with the city and with access to nature at its edge. So thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you so much, JJ, and thank you for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to see you, even just on screen. And I want to thank the amazing panelists on this program today for the urgent work that you do to connect Philadelphians to land and nature and history. My name is Kendra Brooks, and I'm a council member at large for the city of Philadelphia. And at first I want to say how I got connected. I actually met JJ, and he told me about this amazing walk. But he also told me about it in the midst of me running for office. And then the pandemic hit. So I'm really excited to hopefully be able to connect, join you guys in September on one leg of the walk or more, but at least I'm trying to commit to at least one, because I'm just listening to JJ talk about this. It definitely excited me to want to take part and encourage my staff to do so as well. One of my top priorities as a city council member is fighting for the communities who are most affected or impacted by toxic environmental conditions and pollution, a housing crisis, and just looking through all of these things with a restorative lens. When I think about it, how do we heal from centuries of colonization, enslavement, redlining, gentrification, deportation, and displacement? And how do we achieve justice for Indigenous people, Black people, brown people, immigrants, working class people who have been marginalized and stripped from their rights to land? I know that in communities like mine, in Nicetown and other parts of North Philadelphia, We have historically borne the brunt of environmental racism and the housing crisis. This includes high rates of air pollution, toxic schools, lack of tree coverage, poisonous soil, and it also includes poor housing stock and high rates of eviction and high rates of homelessness. We have bus depots, power plants, refineries, and high volume highways are clustered in working class Black and brown neighborhoods like mine. And these conditions have real consequences. We know that these neighborhoods have high rates of asthma, low life expectancy, and are more susceptible to extreme weather events. And these are also the same neighborhoods, brown, Black neighborhoods, that are pushed out of the communities that they live for generations because they can no longer afford to live there. We realize that our lived environment, both in more urban areas and in green areas, is a result of political choices. And as a result of power struggles around industry, capitalism, race, class, and immigration. And in order to fight for a better, more just future for everyone, every person in this city, it is important that people are exposed to these different histories and landscape. So I'm happy to see everyone here today committed to land justice, people who want to explore these stories and share their histories, because Philadelphia is a beautiful city with complex history, and we can only make it more beautiful when we truly engage in it and with it in all its complexities. So thank you, JJ, for your work, and thank you everyone here for being here today and just making this happen and pull it together. I appreciate you. So much gratitude here.
Thank you, Kendra. We're so delighted to have you here and appreciative of all the work that you're doing. You spoke about environmental justice issues, and one of the things that struck me the first time that I did the walk was on our last day coming out through Eastwick. We found our way wandering into just like a hill of like forest and tall grasses. And near it had been a neighborhood that looked like working class, maybe lower income neighborhood. But it was so lovely. They had these woods in their backyard. And then when we came out of the woods, we realized that there was a sign that we had been wandering around in a toxic waste Superfund landfill. That is the Clearview landfill, one of the 2 toxic waste sites in that corner of the city. And that was really striking to me. It's not in my backyard, and there's many reasons, and to speak to equity and the complicated issues that you were evoking too. Like when we first did the walk, Anne, Adrian, Sam, and I were conscious that we were 4 white folks with a Knight Foundation grant, moseying our way from Southwest Philly up to Northeast Philly where the prisons are. And there's a more frequently taken path from Southwest Philly to the prisons in Northeast Philly. And most of the folks who take it don't look like me, and there's a lot of complicated things there. That's why one of my goals about the walk is not just to do it, but to invite more people into it and to work so that it is more accessible to all. We'll be raising some money to provide stipends. Our goal is to be able to offer $5,000 in stipends this fall for the September walk, so that people who need cash to take a day off work or cover childcare have some means to do that. Because yeah, this whole project of walking around the city could just be an act of colonialism. The goal is for it to be something that is really safe and accessible, and that the participant pool, as it grows, also comes to more represent the population of the city. That's something that I'm committed to, and that's something I hope that all of you who are engaging with the walk will commit yourself to as well. With that said, let's talk about some of the places around the city, and let's first introduce our panelists, because we have Stephanie Phillips from Riverfront North Partnership, along with Temwa Wright from the Cobbs Creek Ambassadors, and Mike Weilbacher from the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education. I live in West Philly, so Cobbs Creek, where Temwa works, is kind of part of my backyard. And the Schuylkill Center is a place that I had been familiar with through a friend's artist residency there in their land lab program years ago. Beautiful space up on this side of town. So we've got boom, boom. And then Stephanie works all along the upper Delaware riverfront there. So I'll let them introduce themselves and tell you a little quick bit about their organizations. Maybe I'll invite Stephanie to go first, and then maybe you can pass it on to one of our fellow panelists.
Thanks, JJ. And again, my name is Stephanie Phillips. I'm Riverfront North Partnership. Really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. And I've long been a fan of the Schuylkill Center and the Cobbs Creek Ambassadors. So I'm eager to learn more about what you're doing right now. I'll just start and kick us off with talking about what Riverfront North is. I'm sure that it's a fairly new organization for some of you, but we are the nonprofit that's working with the city of Philadelphia to build, activate, and steward an 11-mile network of parks and trails along the Delaware River in Northeast Philadelphia. When it's complete, the Greenway will encompass 8 public parks and a trail that runs from Allegheny Avenue all the way up to the Bucks County line. And the good news is that 7 of those 8 parks are open to the public. And the final park, which will be a 10-acre park on a former concrete factory in Bridesburg, is, fingers crossed, going to break ground in the next year. And there's 3 trail segments yet to be built. The trail is not continuous yet. But there is some good news on that front as well. There is a K&T trail segment that is actually going to be let tomorrow, which means the RFP will be released. And we hope to break ground in early fall for that. So we're really excited because that trail has been in a vision since 2004. So that's kind of a big part of what we do. But, when we're not building green spaces, which, as I said, it's kind of more of a generational work. We are doing a lot of work about connecting communities to the riverfront. And a little bit about Northeast Philly. I saw that a few of you are very familiar with Northeast Philly. I am new to Northeast Philly. I've spent my career in parks along the edges, but before I went to Riverfront North, I was actually at Bartram's Garden for almost 12 years. So Southwest Philly, Northeast Philly, big difference. And I've been learning a lot in the past 4 years. But Northeast Philly has a perception of being like a stronghold for white working class stability. What I've learned in the last 4 years is that the reality is changing. It's different than that. It's one of the most diverse areas of the city. 20% of the people who live in Northeast Philly were not born in this country. And there have been kind of startling and disturbing spikes in poverty in some of these neighborhoods because there are people who are aging out. There's a more transient population who might be renting. So it's just a lot of things that we're thinking about as we're trying to make these connections to community. And lastly, I just want to say the 3 ways we do reach community before I turn it over. The first thing we do is we offer gateway recreational and outdoor experiences. So for example, in 2022, we have a free program in one of the parks nearly every day of the week. So that could be archery, free fishing, yoga, outdoor movie nights. Just getting people outdoors is important. The next thing we do is community advocacy and engagement. We do this in the traditional ways, like when we are designing parks, but we also have other things like community art projects. We do mini grants, we do discovery trips with committees, and we've been convening stakeholders around a lot of behavioral issues that we've been finding in our parks these past years, the boom parties, the ATVs, the dirt bikes. We're just trying to have a seat at the table with the community to try to figure out solutions to those. And the last thing we do is land restoration and stewardship. So at Pennypack on the Delaware, which is in the Holmesburg neighborhood, we have cleared about 10 acres of invasive plant species. We've replaced those plants with about 1,400 native trees in the last 5 years. We've also given away trees in Holmesburg and Frankfurt because those neighborhoods have had a significant decrease in tree canopy in the last decade. And that project won a 2021 Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence. So those are the things we're working on. We're not too busy at all, and looking forward to turning this over. And I'm going to ask Temwa if she'd like to speak.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's so great to see you. I'm Temwa Wright. I am representing Cobbs Creek Ambassadors. I am an ambassador. And as JJ said, Cobbs Creek is in West Philly. It's actually, it is right on the border near Upper Darby and Delaware County, right there, as he's pointing out. And I've been an ambassador since 2020. So you might be asking, what is a Cobbs Creek ambassador? So an ambassador is basically a neighbor who adopts a section of Cobbs Creek Park and leads regular cleanups in the park according to his or her schedule. I was the first ambassador. The program was actually, facilitated by Andrew Wheeler and Rich Gufanti, who are two white guys from like University City area. And they were like cleaning up the park. Ever since 2018, they would come and they would lead regular cleanups, and it was mostly the two of them, and they would invite other people to do it. But Cobbs Creek Park is pretty extensive. It's 5-mile stretch. And they said, well, first of all, we're not from Cobbs Creek. We don't really represent the community. We don't look like the community here. And it's huge, and there is so much need. So maybe instead of us trying to do it ourselves, let's see if we can get neighbors, especially those from Cobbs Creek, to facilitate cleanups through this initiative, Cobbs Creek Ambassadors. So they invited me, they told me about the idea. I said, oh, that's an excellent idea. I hate litter. I can't stand just how much, filth there is around Philadelphia, unfortunately, which has been the nickname that Philadelphia sometimes gets is Filthadelphia. And so I said, I'll be your first ambassador. And I started in 2020. Now, since then, we've grown. We have about 9 ambassadors now. We've adopted about 2.8 miles of the 5 miles of Cobbs Creek. Last year, we collected about 12,000 pounds of trash. This year alone, we are almost at 8,000 pounds of trash. And so we are on a trajectory to exceed last year's achievements. And it's been really exciting. We have about 600 people on our distribution list, and each ambassador, we have like a whole schedule. So we have Thursday evening, Saturday, Sunday afternoon. I do Wednesday mornings from 8 to 9. So my cleanups, we call them power hour cleanups. And the goal is get in, get out 1 hour, because there's always more trash than what your 1 hour can do. But we have a very strict cutoff for my cleanups, or you can keep cleaning forever. But what I really love the most about it is it's a very sustainable approach and effort to have the park adopted by residents who care and lead cleanups according to their own schedule. But we also collaborate with the city. So we do hold the city accountable for their part, because the truth is, yes, the city has a role to play in keeping our neighborhoods clean, and volunteers also have a role to play. And so we have a very close relationship with the city of Philadelphia, with Parks and Rec. We work on the park side, and across from Cobbs Creek Park is the residential side. So sometimes we'll have to distinguish that, because residents will come and say, hey, we need to be doing this. It's like, oh yeah, that's the streets, Philadelphia street side. We are in the Parks and Rec side. So it's important to know who your partners are. But we have an amazing partnership with the city of Philadelphia, Parks and Rec. And where we've been able to advocate for more resources, because we said, look, why does this neighborhood look worse than other neighborhoods? We need it to have just as much investment as other neighborhoods do. And although we're willing as volunteers to help, we can't do it all. And so this year they actually had allocated seasonal maintenance attendants that help to keep the park even cleaner. So we're seeing a decrease in the trash, which means we can extend to other things. We're very strategic as ambassadors. This year, our goal is what we call T-cubed strategy, and T-cubed stands for trash, trails, and trees. Trees, trash, trails. So instead of just attacking trash and litter, which a lot of people are attracted to, we are also looking at our tree health, because we know the city has a goal to increase the tree canopy, and we want to be part of the city's goal. We're looking at our trail systems. We partner with some of our other partners around signage, and how do we make our trails safer and more usable, right? And what I usually say is Cobbs Creek is like a hidden gem. A lot of people don't know all that exists there. And I was so excited when I got involved with walk around Philadelphia because I did the first segment, which was my backyard, which was Cobbs Creek. And I was like, oh, let me show you this, let me show you that. So I definitely would encourage you, if you've never done it before, or if you've done it, definitely do it for the segment that represents you, because it was really exciting to have visitors in my backyard. And I could say, oh, let me show you some like aspects you might not know about Cobbs Creek. And I also in turn got to see different aspects. Yeah, which was really exciting. And we actually, a big old project ended up ensuing after the walk. I did that on February 12th. And we had gone by the Cobbs Creek Golf Course restoration, quote unquote, restoration project, which looked vastly different from the day we walked to a couple weeks later when one of our ambassadors said, hey, they've cut down all these trees. And I was like, wait a minute, are you sure? Because I was just walking around there and there was trees. It's like, no, it's like acres and acres. And then come to find out, literally like 100+ acres, I think they end up doing 112 acres, anyway, had been deforested. And we got involved as ambassadors to advocate for that to be done well or better. And now it's still an ongoing conversation. But yeah, that's basically the ambassadors. In short, it's neighbors who care, who adopt a section, who lead regular cleanups. And it feels great. Go ahead, Mike, your turn.
Thank you so much, Temwa. Thank you. So I'm Mike Weilbacher, the director of the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education. So we're at the top of the city in Upper Roxborough. Though we're called the Schuylkill Center, we're not exactly on the river. I wish we were, but we're just perched above the river. We're a giant 300+ acre rectangle of permanently protected forest. We've been doing environmental education since the mid-60s. The first gathering of teachers in the city to talk about this new thing called environmental education was held at the Schuylkill Center back in the day. Many people still call us our old name, the Schuylkill Valley Nature Center. So many people fondly remember that name, but we've been the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education for more than 30 years now. So we do all the environmental education programming that you might expect at nature centers, field trips, walks, lectures like these, town meetings, festivals. We had a big Earth Day festival. It was the first sort of normal festival in 3 years. We had 500 people. It was like, hallelujah, it was extraordinary. We do a lot of restoration work on our own property, etc. So we don't have a lot of programming. We also run our own nature preschool. There's a whole movement nationally of nature-based preschools where 3, 4, 5-year-olds are immersed for the school day in the outdoors. So we have 85 kids who are with us, and that's been kind of our secret weapon in the pandemic. Extraordinarily low caseload in the school because the teachers and the kids are outside. Even in February, they're outside. The teachers say there's no bad weather, just bad clothing. The teachers are amazing. We also operate, many of you know this, a wildlife clinic, the only one in the city of Philadelphia. So we take in a couple of thousand injured, orphaned, sick animals of something like 150 species. Come everything from little hummingbirds to massive bald eagles. There's only a few of those in the whole region, but we're the only one in the city. So right now they're being buried in baby robins and baby cottontail rabbits, and things like that. So we also have the nation's most ambitious environmental art program of any nature center, as JJ knows. And so he mentioned Land Lab, and what essentially that's a project that was just refunded by the National Endowment for the Arts. And was a call out for artists. So essentially artists use our land to heal environmental concerns. So they deal with stormwater and or invasive plants and or endangered species, any number of issues that we're facing through their art. So we have a gallery in the Nature Center and then outdoor installations as well. So we have these wonderful indoor-outdoor combinations of shows. The new show is called Companions. It's really a wonderful show. So we do environmental art, environmental education, nature preschool, wildlife rehabilitation, and land stewardship. And we have lots of volunteers that help us with all those things. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate you all being here. And yeah, I'm going to pop the Land Lab link in the chat because I just got that application myself and I'm totally going to apply for it. I'm maybe to start us off, I'd really rather y'all just go wherever you want to talk amongst yourselves, but I'm curious about this idea of being on the city's edge and how it might impact you. Yeah, anyone want to jump in there?
Go ahead, Steph.
Yeah, I love this conversation because, you know, for us, you know, we really do believe that every Philadelphian should have access to their river and nature on the river. And, you know, I think we all as Philadelphians bear the legacy of the river as an industrial artery, as well as the I-95 corridor. And what that has done in Northeast Philly has created a physical barrier for folks to get to the riverfront. And the physical barrier is not just 95, but like the remnants of these brownfields along the river. So, and it's just ironic because our office is located in neighborhoods that were once called the river wards. But like when we go out into Bridesburg or, you know, Port Richmond or Wissinoming, you know, a lot of folks don't even know that these riverfront parks exist and that they have been accessible for some decades. So some of them are decades, some of them are much newer, which is great. So anyway, that's kind of where I think about is like, what does an edge mean? And then my final point would be kind of this, this idea in terms of the relationship with the city of Philadelphia, where, you know, we've already touched on the fact that a lot of the resources are directed towards more center city, high visitation parks, all of that. And, you know, fewer resources are directed into Southwest Philly, Northwest Philly, and Northeast Philly. So that does have an impact on the way these parks look and how, you know, we're able to resource them. And I think that's what makes partnerships like ours really important to the city of Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if that's your experience as well, but.
Yeah, I would concur with that in terms of where the investments are in terms of care and upkeep. What I've noticed as an ambassador is, you know, being on the edge, we see a lot of like what I call no man's land, like the areas nobody really cares for and claims. And so like you just see a bunch of trash and just unkept areas because it's like beyond Philadelphia's boundary. And then Delaware County is like, it's too close to Philly. So there's a lot of dumping that goes in these areas where nobody really claims them because one, they're often not visited, they're not really seen. And the less activity they get, the less attention they get. Well, that's definitely been the trend. And it's really, the thing that makes me saddest is, you know, the Darby Creek watershed is an amazing, huge tributary to Delaware River. And it's like 123 miles of like, you know, little creek systems. And it's amazing and it's beautiful, but it's full of like trash and it's not really kept up, although different sections of it actually look better than others. And as I discovered when I was walking around, you know, with Walk Around Philadelphia, I was like, oh, it's actually cleaner here. And my section of the creek is disgusting. But around 500,000 residents live around this creek, this watershed, right? The Darby Creek watershed. And from both sides, both Delaware County and Philadelphia County. But because it's like this, you know, meeting place, it also gets like very little care. It gets a lot of the trash that just kind of moves there, but then it doesn't really get that much care. So I would say the model of out of sight, out of mind is really huge because we have to increase the utilization of a lot of these spaces so that they do get the attention. Yes, Center City and other places get higher attention and more notice because they are attracting the tourists and they're attracting people and they're very visible. So we need to increase visibility of these other places and utilization of these other places so that when people are walking around, they're like, oh, I don't want to walk around in a dump. We got to do something about it. But if they don't even know that it's a dump because they don't really use it, then it's easy for people to just dump and misuse and just it goes unnoticed. So out of sight, out of mind, and definitely lots of no man's land going on when I'm out there cleaning and stuff. So yeah, that's what I would contribute to what it kind of means to live on the city's edge.
So we're a privately owned, our 300 acres is essentially owned by the nonprofit. So we're not a public forest. So we're not on any park map that the city puts out. So I remember this memorable conversation where I heard that the father of the director of Friends of the Wissahickon confided that on Thanksgiving weekends, he'd come to the Schuylkill Center for a walk because it was less crowded. So the Wissahickon gets all this traffic because everybody knows to go for a walk in the Wissahickon. We're a mile away. We're over Ridge Avenue and we don't get a lot of traffic. So it's up. If you want to come for a nice nature walk, we're your place. So, you know, we have loyal members and volunteers and our programs are well attended, but you know, we are off the beaten path. We're kind of, you know, you don't see us from any busy road. We actually just put up a big sign as kind of our back door on the Schuylkill River Trail. Up until then, there was just a giant chain link fence that had a wall of invasive vines growing up, and so no one even knew we were hiding behind. So now we're getting people coming up from the river trail, which is awesome. But yeah, I think about that also. We're so inconvenient to everybody. Both you have to drive, you have to come by car pretty much if you want to get to the Schuylkill Center. You can get there by a bus to Ridge Avenue, but then it's a mile walk. And there's no sidewalks between the bus and us. So we struggle with accessibility. It's a big issue for us, and it's in a long-term planning to figure out ways to address that better. But yeah. And yes, you can almost throw a rock and get to White Marsh Township. So we're on that edge of the city. So it's a land border for us. But the nice thing is we do get visitors from White Marsh who, so they're car-based, they drive everywhere. So driving to a nature center is right in their wheelhouse. So.
I saw that Elizabeth in the chat had asked a question about that question of land borders and the different county administrative borders versus water ones. Are there any other ways that you know, coordinating with Philadelphia versus what's on the other side of the creek, maybe for you, Temwa, or Stephanie? I mean, you're on the border of New Jersey, and also I guess up at Glen Ford, you're on another physical land border. But yeah, how do those factors of different administrations and things play in for you?
For me, our main contacts and partners are on the Philly side. I build most of our volunteers are Philly folks, but we do have one ambassador who is from Upper Darby. And so I remember when we were doing the advocacy around the golf course and the trees, it's like it doesn't just impact Philadelphia residents, you know, that's a shared, the environmental impact of that project is shared across counties. And so there's a need to engage both sides of the creek. Yeah, so I would say we don't do it very much deliberately, but it's something I think we have to be more intentional about. And we have partnerships with DCBA and other organizations that work, you know, in multiple places. Yeah, but it's a need. We don't organize it as much with these other institutions outside of Philadelphia. I will say this one story I had once. So one of the reasons I became an ambassador is I adopted my section, which is Christian to Catherine. I love tennis. I'm a big tennis player, and like that's my home court. It's right there near Catherine in Cobbs Creek. And this one time there was a home invasion, or what looked like a home invasion happening across the street. So I was like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? Somebody's like actively breaking these windows. So I go to call 911 and they were like, oh, well, you know, this is not Philadelphia. Like, you know, I was right across the street, but my 911 call was dispatched to Delaware County. And I was like, no, there's somebody like right here. I can see him. It's Philadelphia. And I'm giving the address, but they had to reroute me to Philadelphia's 911 system. So it's really interesting how it was just so close, but, you know, not always so coordinated. Yeah.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, because the Greenway, I think we have 3 police districts on the Greenway. And one of the impacts that we've been dealing with, which I think is a topic with a lot of parks recently, is the further you are away from neighborhoods and activity, the more you get activity like ATVs, dirt bikes. And on the river right now, there are a ton of, have you all heard of boom parties? Okay, this is where folks have like basically fit out the back of their car with a wall of speakers, and then they come and tailgate. So what happens when you're on the waterfront is that the music goes across the water, and while you may not hear it in Bridesburg, you will totally hear it in Palmyra, and you will be awake until 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 days a week because of these parties. So there's a whole lot of coordination around people in New Jersey calling Philadelphia police, and police are like, we don't know where this party is. Can you tell us? So people from New Jersey driving over the bridge to like find out where this party is. Anyway, it's a whole thing that's going on right now, and it actually what happened 3 weeks ago is that Parks and Rec temporarily closed one of the public boat launches on the Greenway because there was a party that went on for 24 hours, and it was very loud. There's a YouTube video of it, and that's kind of like, oh my God, how did that happen? It was about 2,000 people in the park, unpermitted vehicles, and it was great. So that's one thing. The other thing, which is kind of odd, which was new to me, was this phenomenon on the river with users who actually come and park their car and just don't get out in the park, but they just actually love to watch the river. So that was, that has never been my experience in a park. And it was something like, I was just like, why are they just sitting in their car? I never really understood it, but it's a really nice way to spend a lunch break. And it impacts us because we're all about increasing biodiversity and habitat. So we want bushes and stuff on the riverfront. And we get a lot of questions about why we don't clear the view shed. So it's this constant conversation, and we look at it as an educational opportunity, but it's ongoing.
Some people have been putting some great questions in the chat, and I also see that Susan has a hand raised.
Yeah.
What I might do is call on Susan and then invite y'all also as you'd like to share questions in the chat. And if panelists want to just pull something from the chat and roll with it, we can start phasing in folks' questions there. Thanks, Susan.
Hi, my name's Susan McAdinley. My interest is in the southern part of the Delaware. The area around Pennsport, yes, and Queen Village. And my particular interest is in the historical aspects of that area, which have been almost completely unknown. My particular interest is in Pier 53, which was the immigration pier for Philadelphia. It was Philadelphia's Ellis Island. And it was owned by the Pennsylvania Railroad. Between 1876 and 1926, over 1 million people came from Europe, different parts of Europe, into the city. And some of them have stayed in the area, or some of them moved away but have come back. And many of those people don't even know that their ancestors came into America on that spot, and they live a few blocks away. I'm one of them. I live 8 blocks away, and I discovered that both of my grandfathers came in to Pier 53 from Europe. Last week, Channel 12, they've been running a series of documentaries that were done under the auspices of Precious Places. I don't know if you know about that. And the Pier 53 documentary was shown last Tuesday. So if you get a chance, I have the podcast link if you'd like to see it. But the historical area around the southern Delaware does have its problems, some of which are shared by the north. We have the I-95 barrier, which was built stupidly to keep it effectively has kept neighbors away from the waterfront, and that's being remedied partially by DRWC. They're making the access to Washington Avenue and a couple of the streets so that people can more easily get to the waterfront. One of our problems is homelessness. We have homeless encampments along the river, illegal, of course, and we have a trash problem. But one of the main problems, this is all probably because a lot of the area around the waterfront is owned by real estate developers who have really done nothing to develop the area. We keep every couple of years, we get these proposals by some big real estate development that they're going to build condos and you know, all kinds of terrible things. And they can't really, because it's a floodplain, and then they go to court, and then we don't hear anything, and then we found out that the properties have been flipped. So nobody really knows what's going to happen in that immediate vicinity. We have this one lovely little park, which is the remnants of the immigration pier in Philadelphia. And, you know, it's a gem, and it's going to be improved because there's a pedestrian and bicycle walkway that's just been extended down there, which is part of the trail. Also, I don't know if you people are interested, but I grew up in West Oak Lane, and right on Cheltenham Avenue, which is the border with Montgomery County, near Limekiln Pike, near the confluence, yes, of Ogons Avenue and Cheltenham Avenue, where the 6, it was the terminal for the, yes, exactly, you got it. And I'm 80 years old. I remember when the Cheltenham Shopping Center was a Victory Garden. It's truly amazing. You would not believe that now, but there were people who raised squash and tomatoes in this big field, which was part of the Widener estate, I think, and it had been abandoned. And it's now a main route that leads up to Route 309. That was changed when I was a little kid. And the Cheltenham Shopping Center was built when I was a teenager, so that when I was going to college, I could walk across the street, and I had a part-time job in the Cheltenham Shopping Center. And then I just walk across the street and go home. It was really great. So if you plan to walk up there, I can talk about that area. But particularly if you are planning a walk around this, the Pier 53, Pier 68, I can show you around. I can give you a tour of the historical aspect. And also what I do with school groups is I have been for the past 10 years collecting stories from descendants of the people who came in there. And I write biographies, little bios of these people through the input of the descendants, and they get t-shirts. And when people come to visit, I give them a passenger tag.
That's so great.
So they have a passenger tag of a person who actually stood in the same place that they did, a real person.
That's super cool. You know, Susan, I appreciate your offer of giving tours. I think that's one of the things that is the tension that the walk holds, is we learn so much from the people we're walking with, and then and then in moments like we don't necessarily do guided tours, but like if you're on one of the walks, all of a sudden you learn, oh, Bonnie lives right around the corner here in Northeast Philly and can tell us something about it. And you're talking about the trails changing, being developed. That's one of my favorite things about doing the walk again. Every time I've done it 9 times now, no segment is ever the same. Something's always changed, something's always developed. So I definitely invite you all to join for a segment, walk it with different people, walk it with on a different day. There's always more to see on the edge of the city. Thank you, by the way, Temwa, for putting that info in for Narendra. I know was asking to join. I know he's a newer neighbor of yours. And Mike, I think you wanted to tackle one of the other questions that someone had asked.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Susan, thank you. That was so wonderful here. I appreciate that. So I was struck by Dan's question about Karakung being the original name for Cobbs Creek, and non-settler pre-colonial names for Schuylkill in Delaware. Of course, Delaware is named Lord Delaware. But I believe the Delaware's name was, I'm going to probably mispronounce it, but something like Lenape-Wittuck. So the river of the Lenape. So the river was named for the people. And the translation of Lenape just means people, the original people. So that was their river. And Schuylkill, I just love the Schuylkill's name. It is so deeply ironic. It means in Dutch hidden river, because the early Dutch knew that somewhere around Tinnicum, which used to be like 1,000, maybe even 10,000 acres of reeds and swamp, they knew that there was somewhere a major river that came in there, but they couldn't find it because there was just all this swampland. So they called it Schuylkill. It's the hidden river. And I just love that name because, well, the Lenape knew where it was. They didn't have to look really hard. But we have spent the last 200 years hiding ourselves from the Schuylkill, like Steph was talking about. And Temwa was talking about I-95 coming down, we're blocking us off from the Delaware. We did the same thing on the other side. We put the expressway and all the trains right up to Schuylkill, and we blocked us off from that. And what I love is in the last 10, 20 years, we're all rediscovering our rivers. We're all going back to these things. Actually, we're rediscovering nature. And I feel like what also happened in the last 200 years, we marginalized nature itself. Nature was the waste places that we didn't want, that weren't useful. So nature just grew back. And now we're turning those back into parkland again. So we're sort of, I think even with COVID, COVID just highlighted the importance, the urgency of getting access to nature, because nature actually physically heals us. It calms us. You go for walks in nature, you will live longer. You'll flat out live longer. Your breathing changes, everything changes. So get some green space. But nonetheless, so Lenape-Wituck was the Delaware. Oh, everyone knows the original name was Schuylkill. Manayunk. Manayunk was the original name of, I've gone to several sources, and this they don't always agree, but Manayunk is one of the sources. So, but also I think many people have heard Manayunk translated as the place where we drink, which also becomes a joke with all the bars that are in that.
Well, there's also Pashunk,
yep,
which is in my neighborhood, and you know what that means?
No.
It's place where pigeons shit. Yes.
Pardon our French.
Let's see who else's questions we should pull out from here. I appreciate y'all have been so active in the chat, and when I'm here, I'm not always tracking it super well.
It's hard to do both, JJ. You're doing a great job.
It's a handful. One thing I'd love to sort of circle back on. I know that, Mike, you're talking about long-term plans around accessibility. But yeah, I think that's a question that I've been holding a lot is, how do you, who uses the space? How do you get there? And I'm curious to hear you spitball, all three of you, a little bit more about sort of longer term aspirations for accessibility to your spaces.
You can go first, Mike.
So, yeah, as I mentioned, this is a struggle for us. And I'll say the struggle goes back for 40 years, where the environmental education movement has long struggled to hire diverse people in our programming, to lead our programming. It's been changing, but the changes have been really slow. So I think that's one of the prerequisites, is that the staff and the board of our nonprofit better reflects the city than it currently does. We all acknowledge that, and we're working really hard on that, as are every environmental group I know of is working on this exact same issue. So we need to unlock that, and quicker than we have been. So we'll just admit that. And then we have lots of conversations and discussions about ways to get more people into our programming. And a big piece of it is more creative partnerships with more diverse nonprofits. So that, in our, when we do large festivals, we invite partners in who represent organizations that serve underserved people. So we begin to partner with them. And then, and we've been seeing that unlock, where that the diversity of the people choosing to come to the Nature Center is beginning to look a little more like the city that it has. So truthfully, in our history, the people who self-select to walk into the Nature Center have not looked like the city. And so we acknowledge that, and we're working really hard on that.
Yeah, I just have to concur with that idea of self-selection versus recruitment, intentional recruitment. So for me, the challenge is long-term engagement versus accessibility, because we are in the business of trying to engage people with our cleanups and engage people to be ambassadors. And our ambassadors currently are more likely to be white. They're more likely to be those from a higher socioeconomic status. And I think, like Mike said, that is the problem of all, like a lot of environmental groups, right? Who is more likely to engage in nature? Who is more likely to prioritize it? And maybe sometimes people care, but it's not necessarily a priority. One of the things I do intentionally as an ambassador is I recruit off the street. As people are walking and using the park, and and the minorities, especially from the area, because they're walking around. I'm like, hey, we're here every Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Can I get your information? Do you want to join us? And I put the ball in my court. Like, I'll take their information and I'll send them text messages, remind us, hey, we're cleaning up again. Because one thing I noticed is, and I'm big on diversity, and I'm big on engaging people around something we can kind of all agree with. And one thing we can all agree with is we don't like nasty looking spaces, right? And it feels good when you're done. So what it is there's a good feeling when you clean. Although it's such a simple thing, it brings people together and it makes them feel good at the end. And I like it when people feel good, because when people feel good, they'll come back. So for me, it's being intentional about like noticing who's missing from my group and why are they not here. If I'm mostly having females, how do I get the men to show up? If I'm mostly having white people, how do I engage Black and brown folks? If I'm mostly having a certain age group, how do I engage my younger youth? And you have to constantly be intentional and looking at who's missing and why, and reach them. Because self-selection, if you just let self-selection run the course, it's not going to be representative. It's not going to be representative at all. One thing I had to share, which I'm so excited about, is we had, I'll share a couple quick images. When we have cleanups often, but there was a time when we were invited to clean up behind Laura Sims' skate house, which was just a total dump. And we literally got an email, like a phone call. Hey, I'm doing an Easter egg hunt over the weekend, and I know you ambassadors do cleanups. Can you come and help me? Is there a cleanup coming up? And you guys can like do Laura Sims' skate house. I was like, oh, I have a cleanup tomorrow. Let me go take a look at what it looks like. Well, I went there and it looked like a total dump. So I sent out an email to our group, which you guys can join, as I put there in the chat, and it goes to like 500 people. And I was like, all hands on deck, urgent cleanup. We need everybody to come out. And then I sent pictures of what it looked like. But what I really liked, and I'll quickly just share my screen, is, we had a great group of people come. It was a diverse group of people. Wait, why is this not? And that's me. That's part of the team. We had 20 people come out in 1 day's notice. We had 72 bags of trash that we collected. And the city, and this was before, part of the before, and what it looked like after, right? And what was really interesting is there were encampments. One person was talking about the encampment issue. Right? There were encampments, 3 encampments at this site. This was one of the fellows who was living in the encampment. One of my volunteers said, we have to tell them we're here to clean up. And then they said, you should have told us, give us some gloves, give us some bags, we'll clean up too. So he and his wife, who lived in one of the tents there, they got involved, they cleaned up. And the city came, because we have a partnership with them. We said, I called them the day before. We have a lot of trash and we're gonna need it picked up, because there's an Easter egg hunt happening and we can't have this, have kids around the trash. They brought their trucks, they say sure, because they saw the benefit of having these volunteers coming to help them with the work that they also have to do. It was an amazing collaborative event. But in the end, what I want to say is, when you see what your effort can do in combination with other people's effort, you walk away like, I should do this more. I like how I feel. And that's the importance of really this sustainable engagement strategy, or even sustainable accessibility, that when people finally engage with your center, product, program, walk, they should leave feeling like, I really need to do this more, because that's what is going to help them get other people to also engage. So I just had to share. I get excited about this stuff because this is great.
I love everything about that. And what I what I also just really wanted to point out with what you did there was, this is something we've been working on too, but you're not only looking to attract new audience, new people, new engagement, but you're actually engaging the people who are already in the space in a way, like you're meeting them where they are. And that's super important too, I think, as we think about diversity and inclusion in these spaces, because I think historically, environmental organizations have had a mindset around specific types of appropriate activities. But that's kind of a journey for most people, particularly people who maybe don't feel comfortable in a natural space. So that's really important what you're doing there. And congratulations.
I just thought the grass was greener in the second shot. After the grass was happy.
Like, finally, that burden is lifted off me. I can grow.
You know, Temwa,
Yeah.
another thing that you're doing there I think is lovely is just the way you're telling the story of this to us, to your fellow volunteers, right? Because there's so much out there that tells us that's the important stuff over there, those shiny skyscrapers in the middle of the city, not the margins, right? Or those people up on the billboards, not our neighbors. And by just sort of documenting what you're doing, sharing with your neighbors, inviting them into it. I bet you've got a couple people in this group right here who are already sending you emails or about to, who are gonna join next. And that's how we build things, slowly over time, one step at a time. So speaking of time, I wanna be mindful, we are at 6:30. We have time to linger, but some people do need to cut out. So I wanna be mindful of time. I want to share two quick things with y'all. That I'm excited to invite you to. Dan talked about how the border itself is this artificial overlay on what is Indigenous land. So here's also what Philadelphia looks like, right? Do you see it right there? Do you see the Navy Yard? Do you see the Delaware? Do you see the Schuylkill? Cobbs Creek, doing this backwards is hard. I'm excited that with the Environmental Humanities Program at Penn and the Independent Seaport Museum, they've chosen me for this Ecotopian Toolkit, one of several artists to do some work around the Delaware River watershed justice issues. And as part of it, I was proposing to use the walk as an invitation into the watershed and learning about it. And instead of just doing a walk, I went and dabbled in a whole new medium of letterpress printmaking. And so we're making these prints of the watershed, and then we're overlaying the shape of the city. So you'll have an opportunity on Saturday. We have some workshops in the morning on Penn's campus and in the afternoon at the Independent Seaport Museum on Penn's Landing, where you'll get to sandwich this on top of this and make your own map of the city of Philadelphia. If you'd like, it's pretty fun to just sort of play with the ink and all of a sudden walk away with a individual, unique little piece of artwork that you've made. So I'd invite you all to that. And also with us is Anne DeForest, who's one of my original perimeter walkers, who has compiled a lovely anthology entitled Ways of Walking. It is being released by New Door Books right now. There's a virtual launch event tomorrow evening, as well as an in-person event at Calvary Church at 48th in Baltimore on Sunday. That's all on the same links that Matilda just popped in the chat. Would love to see you there. There'll also be a reception at the Independent Seaport Museum on Friday the 20th, a free thing featuring all the Ecotopian Toolkit artists that you would be most welcome to join. And my secret reveal, I'm hoping this is going to be installed in time by then. I'm going to share a screen real quickly that we got permission from the, so we'll be making some postcards to go with those maps. Can you all see? Yes, you can. That will use the same print, but this will invite people to discover locations like the Schuylkill Center and all of the points along the way, pointing people to points along the river. And then we got permission to install this on the Penn's Landing, Delaware River, currently fabricating this sign so that people who are doing a little part of our walk of walking the city's perimeter on Penn's Landing, they're just walking the Delaware border for a block or two, will be invited to walk a little further. What happens if you just keep going and following this border? Like, you will make your way to the Cobbs Creek Community Environmental Center eventually. You'll make your way to Lardner's Point Park. You'll make your way to the Schuylkill Center. So we're putting this sign will be up right across from the Independent Seaport Museum, right on the river, and hopefully we'll get to put more up later along the way. It may or may not be fabricated in time for Sunday. I'm learning a little bit about how long oil paints take to dry and CNC milling machines and so on and so forth. Those are my little exciting invites for upcoming stuff. The next edition of the walk will also be in September. We've published the dates online, so hopefully you can mark your calendar right now. Registration won't open until August, but we'd be delighted to have you come do a chunk of the perimeter. That's my housekeeping announcements. Really, I would really just want to thank our panelists and also say that for folks who want to stick around, we can stay in conversation past 6:30. I'm here for a bit longer, happy to talk about the walk itself. But also, I think some of you probably have more questions for Stephanie and Temwa and Mike, but I also want to be mindful of time. So I want to say thank you, all of you, for joining. Yeah, I'm just so appreciative. This has been really lovely. And also just like scratching the surface, there's so much more to have. So I look forward to walking with you along the way and having more conversations along the way. Yeah, thank you.
JJ and Matilda, thank you so much for what you do. I love this crazy project that you have, and I just love the conversations I have with you. So, and meeting Temwa and Mike has been a real pleasure. So thank you.
I agree. Thank you for including us. Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you all.
Yes. Ditto.
And I'll say that because we are a larger group, if folks want to linger and chat a little bit longer, I'll set up breakout rooms and we can like get in some smaller rooms to chat a little bit. And also for folks who are like, it's 6:30, we need to be done, let's peel out. Then maybe we'll have a moment of goodbye, and whoever remains will either just chat together, or if there's 20 of us, maybe I'll split us up into 2 little breakout rooms or something. So it's not too large of a unwieldy crew. Ready, steady, make your choice. Do you want to stick around a little longer, or do you want to say farewell? Either way, I'm very grateful for you in the world. It's where people say goodbye. And I'll just linger around and see who's here. Elizabeth, thanks for your question earlier. That was really sweet. I'm going to stop the recording also. But usually when I stop the recording is when someone then has a brilliant comment that I wish was recorded, but I'm still going to do it.